What better way to start the day than submerging your body into frigid, sub 40 degree waters? It has literally changed not only my life, but the lives of many across the world. Let's talk about why. Today, we're going to explore the icy waters of cold exposure and how it benefits not just your body, but most importantly, your mind. So we're going to dive into the mental health benefits of cold exposure, the science behind it, and some pretty surprising physical benefits as well. Now, this is something we picked up, was it back in 2020?
2021.
21?
Mm-hmm. We were at my parents' house.
During COVID? It was pre-COVID?
No, that was after.
It was after.
I mean,
after
it was
COVID.
during. But
Yeah, so this is something, I was intrigued by it initially, not thinking about any type of physical benefits or even like mental health benefit. I guess somewhat mental health, but really wanting to start my day with something really, really hard. And there's nothing I hate more than being cold. This was honestly a little before the actual wave of cold plunges, cold exposure happened. Like, it was something I explored a little bit watching some Wim Hof that I just came across. I don't know what piqued my interest to that directly, but it was...
we were in New York, actually, filming for Fit Coach Pro, and we were talking with the videographer we were working with at the time. I don't remember how the topic got brought up, or it was cold that day. We were out filming outside, and it was freezing cold in like early November, and we got on the topic of like doing a cold plunge or something, and you just kind of said you were interested in it, but you hate being cold. Like, that was really just your thing. Like, you hated being cold. And I remember that's where it started. And then we came home like that week after that, and you bought a tub and put it in my parents' backyard.
Yeah, and when I started, I was doing this after the gym, which is kind of a no-no at this point. We all recognize that for those who want to focus on building muscle, so not necessarily for strength or anything like that. But we were going to the gym at 4:45?
We would go super early because we wanted to go before Kai woke up, and we kind of were maximizing having my parents being home with him, so we both could go at the same time. Would go to the gym. It was pitch black out, obviously, in November in the winter, and we would come back home. I remember there was snow, maybe not for the first one, but there was snow on the ground for that first week that you did it. And you would walk out to the cold plunge barefoot and then do it and then walk inside. And I remember my mom would just look out the window at you thinking that you were insane. Mm-hmm.
Which was kind of the point. I wanted to do something ridiculous, and I think it helped me in that regard. But the more consistent that I got with it, the better I started to feel, and the more I recognized, okay, there's something to this. It's not just, the mental challenge of making myself commit to something really difficult to start the day. So we've done a couple deep dives into cold exposure in previous episodes. This is going to be our deepest dive yet, and actually, giving you the personal experiences, but also a lot of the science behind that and what's actually happening, because I think this is something that many of you can benefit from. If you're not currently doing it, we've had clients who are like, okay, Josh is a lunatic. That's something I'm never going to do. And
I said that.
I know you said that too. So why did you finally start?
I think it started like when you did the first day. I was like, I think you're losing your mind, because we were 6 months deep of living with my parents at this point, waiting for our house to be built. We were in a rough place, just like everything wise, like business wise. We didn't really have space to work. It was hard on our relationship. It was just hard in general. And then I'm just a very, like, when you do something, I want to do it just because you did it, and I want to prove to you that I could do it too.
It's true.
So I did it after you kind of started, and I don't think at that time I was doing it for the right reasons. Like, I really just wasn't expecting anything from it. I was just kind of doing it to do it. And then once we moved into our house, like maybe 2 or 3 months later, we were still in the depths of the infertility stuff. I started doing the cold showers, and that's really where it kind of like kicked in for me. Like, wow, this really does help me mentally, as far as just bringing me back down when I'm about to have a panic attack. So it kind of was a weird process for me. But once I started trusting that process of like what it could do, it really started to impact me in a positive way.
And keep in mind, this is before any type of research. This is that we were doing. We were doing it strictly off of how we felt and like, okay, there's something to it.
And we read the Wim Hof book at that point.
Not until we were into it a little bit.
No, we had it at my parents' house.
I'm saying I bought the book afterwards, after we started.
Okay.
So once, hey, there's something to it, that's when we bought the book, started looking it up. Okay, what are the things that's actually happening physiologically, like when you do this? So those are some of the things we want to dive into today. This first part will kind of focus primarily on the mental side of things, the mental health. We really don't do it for physical benefits, and even those people give some pushback on the data there, but we'll kind of mention what those could potentially be. But really, we're doing this for the reductions in anxiety and depression, increased resilience in regards to stress, so the stress relief, and really enhanced cognitive focus and cognitive function. So it's just, those are the things, like doing it first thing in the day, like there are benefits to that cortisol spike physically, as far as optimizing circadian rhythm and some other things we'll dive into. But just as far as like setting the tone for what we need to do creatively through the day, like it's a great way to start. So if we kind of dive into this a little bit, if we're talking about reductions in symptoms of anxiety and depression, we're talking about really the production of norepinephrine, which is a hormone linked to improved mood and focus. Now, when it comes to that stress relief and resilience, that's something where we're talking about bringing in the vagus nerve stimulation, which is going to promote relaxation, reducing overall stress levels, really activating the parasympathetic nervous system is a big component here, which we'll dive into here in a bit. But that's really what's helping alleviate those symptoms of anxiety and depression. And then, as we're in regards to the focus and the cognitive function, it does really help with the mental clarity, the alertness, improving that cognitive performance. And that does circle again back to the norepinephrine. So if we kind of jump into the vagus nerve activation. So I mentioned a bunch of things very briefly. We'll just kind of break some of these down. When it comes to cold exposure, and that's particularly with the face and the neck, we're stimulating that vagus nerve. So the nerve connects various organs like your heart, your lungs, your digestive tract. And when it's activated, it can actually reduce your heart rate, which does promote your relaxation. It enhances parasympathetic tone, and the vagus nerve can be stimulated through a process called diving reflex, where cold water or air on the face triggers that specific parasympathetic response. Now, another benefit here is going to be that reduced heart rate. So cold exposure, again, especially to the upper head and upper torso, can cause a reduction in heart rate. And this happens through the activation of the parasympathetic nervous system. Again, slowing the heart, promoting that calming effect, and potentially improving recovery, reducing stress levels. Now, one big part where we kind of slide into the physical benefits, and we'll dive into this a bit further here in a few minutes, but vasoconstriction and blood pressure modulation. So cold exposure actually causes the blood vessels to constrict, which is vasoconstriction, and that can increase blood pressure. But the parasympathetic nervous system that responds to this is then going to slow the heart rate and reduce overall stress levels. Now, after that vasoconstriction happens, so post cold plunge, we get vasodilation. So when we'll go into the physical benefits here in a few, we'll talk about utilizing those muscles within your cardiovascular system. So we're constricting the blood vessels and then dilating the blood vessels, which is forcing those to work a little harder, keeping the tone of those vessels and improving your ability to circulate blood. Now, we can dive into hormone regulation as well. And this is, again, big on the mental health side. So cold exposure can reduce stress hormones like cortisol by promoting the release of endorphins and norepinephrine. So these changes create a balance between the sympathetic, which is your fight or flight response, and parasympathetic, which is your rest and digest response in regards to your nervous system. So we're going to enhance that parasympathetic effect. But wait, doesn't cortisol actually increase during cold exposure? That is the case. There is an initial cortisol spike during cold exposure, but with regular practice, this response is actually mitigated, and the long-term effect should be a reduction in overall stress levels.
So a question I get a lot is cold exposure for women. People are nervous that for women somehow it's a negative, like like due to hormones. I don't know the specifics on why they think that, but I would assume it's because they think it causes the cortisol spike. So how would you respond to someone who said, shouldn't you not do cold exposure? Shouldn't women not do cold exposure due to that?
I would take that up with an actual medical professional. But that being said, we really don't want cortisol to be high, especially throughout the day. But there is a benefit to having that cortisol spike short term earlier in the day. So timing could be a big piece. So if this is something, or a woman who wants to dive into this, has never tried it before, I would still stick with that schedule. Do it first thing in the morning. Don't do it after work. Don't do it midday. Don't do it especially towards bed, because then you start messing with like your body temperature. So ideally, like if you're doing this full protocol, sauna is ideal for pre-bedtime, because then your body is reacting to wanting to bring your core body temperature back down. So that kind of triggers that effect. Whereas if you're already bringing it down, it's actually spiking that cortisol, keeping you awake, but you're kind of inhibiting that process that your body naturally goes through. So I know obviously plenty of women do this.
Myself included,
if you
and both
notice
times.
a negative effect. Go ahead.
I've gotten pregnant doing it consistently both times. I'm not saying I got pregnant because of that, but just some food for thought. Your body is not going to, what am I trying to say? Your body is more likely to be in a good place if you're pregnant. Like your health overall is in a good place. Your hormones overall are in a good place. It's not going to accept a pregnancy if things are all out of whack, if that makes any sense. So food for thought, personal little anecdote there.
Yeah, that's your body being smart. And I'm sure that's a big part of the infertility issues many are having right now. Like if you are not in optimal health, and not to say that you can't get pregnant if you're not in optimal health,
right.
But if you're not in optimal health, your body is aware of that, and it's, reducing your likelihood of getting pregnant.
Yep.
So a couple of things to hit on, because I know we'll mention endorphins and norepinephrine a little bit. So just what do those things do? What are those things actually improving? So endorphins are great for mood enhancement, pain relief, stress reduction. They combat depression. Norepinephrine, improved focus and attention, mood stabilization, stress and anxiety management, and improved memory and learning. So just kind of keep those things in mind when we're talking about boosting those as far as what we're going to get out of that benefit. Now, in regards to mechanisms behind cold exposure's mental health benefits, like why does that happen? One of those is argued to be thermogenesis. So how cold exposure triggers brown fat activation, leading to metabolic and brain boosting effects. Again, talking about that hormonal response with norepinephrine and dopamine. And then brain plasticity, how mild stress from cold exposure improves adaptability and mental resilience. Now, if we go specifically into the brown fat activation by the cold exposure, your body senses cold. So when your body is exposed to those cold temperatures, thermoreceptors in your skin send signals to your brain's hypothalamus, which is your body's temperature regulation center. In response, that hypothalamus activates the mechanisms to increase heat production. So this could be shivering. This could be the transfer of white fat to brown fat. When we are talking about brown fat activation, we're talking about burning energy to produce heat. And white fat does not do that. That's something specifically that brown fat does. Now, cold exposure stimulates the activation of brown fat through the release of norepinephrine. So another physical benefit to that hormone we're talking about. This process, called non-shivering thermogenesis, generates heat to maintain core body temperature. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the metabolic benefits of brown fat activation. That is not the primary reason we're utilizing this. Again, for us specifically, it's been the mental health stuff. But brown fat does burn calories to produce heat. Granted, the actual caloric expenditure from cold exposure is very minimal. And that's why you'll see a lot of people like doing the hate videos on cold exposure for social media. Like, oh, you can eat one more snack-sized Snickers bar.
Well, I think it's like any supplement, right? Like I think a lot of your average people who don't really know much about cold exposure see someone doing it and they may mention the benefits of it burns more calories, and they hear that and they say that and they're like, oh, well, this must be like the magical quick fix. It's not. It's literally just, you have to factor in everything we tell you guys every week. You have to be doing the basics first. And if you're not doing the basics of, focusing on being in a calorie deficit and implementing a proper regular strength training program at the right intensity, and that's progressive, then you can not, I mean, cold exposure is not going to do anything for you when it comes to this aspect of it.
That being said, cold exposure and brown fat activation are linked to improved glucose metabolism. So by burning those fatty acids and glucose for energy, brown fat does help maintain stable blood sugar levels. It does enhance insulin sensitivity, which will reduce the risk of metabolic diseases like type 2 diabetes. But again, enhanced fat burning, that's not really the main thing that we have personally sought out the cold exposure for.
And reducing the risk of metabolic disease, your nutrition plays the biggest role there. You can balance your blood sugar with a balanced protein, carb, fat, fiber meal and getting your nutrition under wraps rather than going out and spending $1,000 on a cold plunge tub and hoping that fixes everything for you.
No doubt. But there are also some brain boosting effects, which again will kind of be our main focus here. So I'm going to skip through the norepinephrine and dopamine. We've talked about that a few times, but a new topic here we can introduce is the association with production of brain-derived neurotropic factors. So BDNF, it's a protein that supports the growth and survival of and differentiation of neurons. It's crucial for learning, for memory, for overall brain health. And by stimulating BDNF, cold exposure can actually promote neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to adapt and recognize itself. So it's very important for long-term cognitive health, mental sharpness, and that's just one more mental health benefit of doing something like cold exposure and, understanding the things that are happening with that as far as getting ourselves motivated to dive in. Now, secondarily, and this is more physiologically physical stuff, and this first one I do agree with. I don't think there's too much data against, but boosting your immune system. So strengthening your immune system through cold exposure by increasing white blood cell count and improving circulation. Studies have shown that cold exposure does boost lymphatic drainage, which does aid in the immune function. And then, we're talking about things like, again, going back to the immune cell increase, reducing chronic inflammation, promoting anti-inflammatory cytokines, boosting norepinephrine and antioxidant defenses, that lymphatic circulation to eliminate pathogens, strengthening the immune system's response through stress adaptation, and supporting overall mental health, which does boost immune function. When you're stressed out all the time, it suppresses your immune system. The sympathetic nervous system activation, fight or flight, your body is not worried about cleaning itself out. It's not worried about healing, reducing inflammation. Like, you're there to thrive on adrenaline and get through whatever that immediate threat is, versus parasympathetic nervous system taking over again to promote overall well-being, slowing things down, that calming effect that we're all looking for. So the two primary ways we're going to talk about how cold exposure improves your immunity are going to be the increased white blood cell production and anti-inflammatory effects. So cold exposure does stimulate the production of additional white blood cells, particularly lymphocytes and monocytes, which play critical roles in fighting infections. Regular cold exposure has also been associated with higher levels of natural killer cells, and those are critical for detecting and destroying virus-infected or cancerous cells. Studies have also shown exposure to cold, especially in forms like cold water immersion, which is your typical cold plunge, or cold showers, can boost the overall count of these immune cells, improving the body's ability to combat infections. Now, the secondary point there, anti-inflammatory effects. Cold exposure has been shown to reduce chronic inflammation, and that's the state that does weaken the immune system, makes the body more susceptible to illnesses, decreases the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines, which are associated with chronic diseases and autoimmune disorders. At the same time, cold exposure also boosts the release of anti-inflammatory cytokines like IL-10, which help regulate immune responses and keep inflammation under control. So as far as, how does that actually help fight infections? Those are just some things to take home and understand. If I'm doing this, here's what's happening physiologically. So no actionable step there, guys. Just want to give you some reinforcement for if you've been on the fence about trying cold exposure, some of the overall well-being benefits you're going to receive from that. Now, diving a little bit more into that circulation and cardiovascular health. We talked about that vasorestriction and dilation. So cold exposure does constrict blood vessels, and when the body warms up, it leads to improved circulation, better heart health, lower blood pressure. This does so by training those blood vessels to contract and dilate efficiently. Again, when we're getting in that cold plunge, cold shower, whatever it is, those vessels tighten up. Now, especially if you're doing contrast therapy where you're going back and forth between the sauna and cold plunge, you're really maximizing that dilation, constriction effect, which is training those muscles. So as they stiffen over time, that's when we start to notice blockages, and we don't see as significant blood flow, which again, cardiovascular risk. So those are the things we're trying to combat physically with cold exposure, and that's something you're not really going to argue against. When you get cold, yes, your blood vessels do constrict. When you heat back up, and even post cold exposure, you get that rebound of vasodilation. So that is strengthening blood vessel elasticity, overall cardiovascular health. We're enhancing oxygen and nutrient delivery while improving waste removal, because as we're improving circulation through those previous mechanisms, those things are happening. Better nutrient delivery, better removal of that waste. We're going to boost microcirculation to support tissue regeneration and immune function, improving venous return and reducing the risk of circulatory issues like varicose veins. Now, the regular stimulation of cardiovascular system through cold exposure can lead to long-term improvements, circulation, heart health, overall vascular efficiency. Now, people have argued that it may improve recovery from physical exercise. I don't notice a big effect there. I know there have been arguments against it. They'll say, like, when you're, especially post-workout, you're limiting the delivery of those nutrients to your muscular cells, which is going to kind of tamp down the muscle building effect post-workout, post-lift.
Resistance training.
So that blunts it. The studies have been fairly strong, showing cold exposure in the 8-hour window post-exercise are really going to enhance those muscle blunting effects.
However, it can be beneficial for post-endurance training. If you're somebody who does a high amount of endurance work, it can help recovery when it comes to doing that afterwards there.
Now, for someone getting started, how would you recommend diving into this? I think you're like the perfect example. You caught wind of it. You initially were turned off by it. And I mean, you saw me doing it for a little bit and initially wanted to just prove that you could do it too. But kind of take the people through, someone who was completely anti-cold plunge, to get started, why they might want to get started even after listening to this episode.
Cold plunge or cold
exposure? Plunge, cold exposure. Start with the showers.
I would say definitely start with the shower, just because that's accessible for pretty much all of you. Well, hopefully all of you listening. And you don't have to just do a separate cold shower every day. You can literally take your normal shower, and at the end of your normal shower, turn it cold, or slowly turn it cold for the last 10, 15, 20 seconds, and just kind of like get in the habit or get used to it that way, if you really want to ease in. If you're a little bit more type A and want to just bite the bullet and try it and like go all in, then start your day with a cold shower every day. I think for me, it's easier to just do it first thing. Like, you're still half asleep. You don't have to talk yourself into it as much, versus like trying to do it later in the day. Like, it's probably not going to happen for me, even at this point. So 2 options there. I would say start with that. And then as you go through a week, 2 weeks, like, just look to extend that time frame that you're in the cold water. So start maybe with, if it's 10 seconds, work your way up to, multiple minutes. You can stay in there for 5+ minutes and just kind of focus on your breathing, focus on just staying calm while you're in the shower, and turn it as cold as possible. And I know for those of you who live in warmer climates, it's not going to be as cold as maybe some of you need it to be, but work with what you've got.
Yeah, definitely start your day with it. You want to remove as much friction as possible. And if you're thinking about it, you get up, you start your day, you're going to come up with 1,000 excuses, just like anything else. So if you're about to get dressed, you're walking through your bathroom anyway, just hop in the shower for 30 seconds and just do it. Get it over with, get it done. At this point, like, that's how I always started my day when I was doing cold showers. At this point, my routines changed a little bit because I'm doing the cold plunges, and it's a 5 minute to do. It's not a crazy 2, but it's 5 minutes out of the way to do it. It's not like I'm getting dressed anyway and I'm walking past it and then whatever. So I wake up, brush my teeth, wash my face, come in here, I'll journal, I'll bang some workout, and then before breakfast at some point, because I like to do it fasted. Being fasted and actually caffeinated, which you don't have to combine those, I don't do it caffeinated, can boost the the dopamine. It's a compounding effect there. So it's a part of my morning routine. It's not first thing for me. As you're doing it, I will say the biggest thing you want to focus on, and this is one of my current focuses because I'm terrible at this, but stillness. Just focusing on being in the present moment. It's going to suck. So to get yourself through that initial suck, kind of remind yourself before you even get in, like, hey, this is why I'm doing it. This is going to be very difficult for 30 seconds. Now, post that 30 seconds, I will say this. It's brutal for 30 seconds, whether you're in the shower, whether you're in the cold plunge, however you're doing it. But as long as you stay calm and control your breath and focus on your breathing, you actually become numb to it after that 30 seconds. Like, it doesn't hurt anymore. You could stay in there basically as long as you want. After that 30 seconds, you're good. So understand that first 30 seconds is going to suck. Remind yourself that you're training for life. Like, this is brutal. I'm going to breathe through it. And by breathing through this thing that really, really sucks, it's going to make the rest of my day so much easier. Every challenge I face, I'm going to understand I can surpass that. I can get through it. And that's what it's doing. That's the building resilience of it. And for us, that was how it started. Building mental resilience, breathing through challenges, breathing through stress, and figuring it out from that point. So that's the first hurdle, is getting in there. And even before you even step in, this is going to suck. I don't want to do this. I have 1,000 reasons why I shouldn't. That's your first exercise of the day. Work through those. Calm your mind. Start your breathing before you even get in. Just don't let any thoughts take over. And they're going to pop into your head. But this is the same kind of effect as meditation. Our goal is to breathe through it and clear our heads. Let those thoughts pass and just become mentally still. And incredible things come from that. So I hope you guys got some value from this one. We did want to switch up the style a little bit. So if you liked it, if you didn't like it, shoot us a DM. Let us know. Send us a question or a response in that anonymous box linked in the show notes. Some take homes. Just give it a shot. Do the 30-second shower. Breathe through it. If you're doing 30 seconds, I will say you're just doing the hard part. So maybe do 30 seconds to introduce yourself and then go to a minute and understand how easy that is. From that point. So share your experiences with us. Tag us on social media. And again, if you guys like this episode, make sure you let us know by leaving a review. Share the episode. Tag us on social media. We appreciate you guys for being here. We are here specifically for you. And, doing those things helps us grow the audience. So if you get any benefit from this show, from this episode, from any episodes you've heard previously, your social media tag and share, your review expands that audience so it can help somebody else. So that's how our community grows. That's how we're going to change the world. That's the goal here. Where can they find you?
I'm at Alessandra Skutnik.
I'm at Josh Skutnik.
Everything else you need is linked in the show notes.